Hi everybody, I'm Phil Liggett and welcome to the Omloop Het Volk, a race which opens the European season in Belgium, and it is indeed a Belgian classic race. These are some of the winners over the years gone by. I'm joined of course by Paul Sherwin here in the commentary box as we now look forward to a clash of the titans as the season gets underway. Some big names here: Peter van Petegem 97 and in 98, Frank van den Broek now in a kind of disgrace, the winner in 99, Museo in the year 2000. This is the finish briefly as the riders now prepare and make themselves ready. The race starting, by the way, from Ghent. It goes out on a huge circuit. We'll have a look at the route very shortly, and it comes back indeed to finish in Lokeren, which isn't too far away from Ghent, but it is quite a little bicycle ride. It's 202 kilometres the race. Here's the route traced for you, leaving Ghent out through Oudenaarde. Then come the first of 10 small little bergs, just like the ones we have often in the Tour of Flanders. The old Quaremont there is a steep climb. The Muur, Valkenberg, Leberg, Berendries, the Molenberg is the last climb of the 10, and then we rush home towards Lokeren. So the riders at the start this morning sign in. We'll have a look at one or two of those before we get out onto the course and the action. We look here now at the start line, and the riders are coming up towards the start to sign in.
This is Herr van Bont, a former winner of Ghent-Wevelgem, now riding for CSC Tiscali. Paul van Heeft, another signing for the strong team for later on this year when they hope to take Tyler Hamilton to the Tour de France, where we expect him to be competitive.
It is amazing. Everybody always seems in such good humour. They're all glad to be back into racing clothing after the months spent training in difficult weather conditions. It is a very nice day because in years gone by, of course, this race has been cancelled because of bad weather. Now there is the champion of Belgium,
Christophe Capella. Jan Kuursepu there, the man former champion of Estonia, a very fast finisher and always a very good man at the start of the season. Now here's a new team for Rolf Sorensen there, now riding for the Landbouw Krediet team. Probably, I would say, Phil, in his last year as a professional cyclist after a very long and illustrious career.
My goodness me, he's ridden, I think it's 15 Tour of Flanders. He's such a fantastic bike rider and had some great wins as well. As you can see, the crowd here, very orderly for a Belgian crowd, watching the riders come and go.
Well, this is Polmans, this is Van Dijk coming in to sign in for the moment. Polman's one of the smaller Belgian teams, but always very competitive in these short Belgian classics.
Yes, one of the riders on that team, by the way, is British Roger Hammond, and let's hope he can put up a good ride this season because he is a very, very good bike rider. Team Mappe coming to the line now.
Looks like Laszlo Bodrogi. And Mappe, not quite the strong team we normally have here. They do have Paolo Bettini on their squad, Dario Cioni, a former mountain bike rider.
Course-wise here, this looks like it's Tom Bonen, the new man on the US Postal team. He's a Belgian rider, under 23 national champion of Belgium. All smiles, what a young face. He's now getting into the big time. And they're coming in now thick and fast. The thing about all bike races around Belgium, France, they don't appear until just about time to take off. And the man who was a world champion with the bands on his arm there, what a great personage, and nice to see him back in the peloton. And this is Johan Museu.
The Vlaamse Leeuw, the Flemish lion, the man that the Flemish people really all do expect to do well here today. Paolo Bettini always rides well in this part of the world, and it really is a very important rendezvous here as Stefan Weserman seems to have lost his pen.
He's not too sure where to go from here. Well, it is the first race of the season for Steph. Spent Christmas, as always, in Down Under, Australia, and now coming back into a rather chillier Europe.
Sergei Ivanov, former champion of Russia.
2 times, in fact, defended the title once. He's no longer the champion. That's now on the shoulders of Dmitry Konishev. Joe Plancart, Cofidis rider. He could do with a big win now to really boost his reputation because he's a jolly good bike rider.
And he also comes at the end of a very long line of Plancarts. Willy Plancart, his father, Eddie Plancart, his uncle, Walter Plancart, his uncle, were all great bike riders before him. And he too, Phil, has been so very close over the recent years to getting himself the very big victory.
Bit of a hill to climb to start the race here, Paul, as they try to come up onto the stand with bike. And the Rabobank team. They're also a team, of course, who have been one of the big teams of Holland.
Mart Wouters, a winner of the Belgian stage of the Tour de France last year into Antwerp, and explaining that he feels very confident today.
Gianluca Bortolami, what a great year last year for him, popping up and winning the Tour de Flanders, and he'll be defending that title, at least he hopes he will, very soon when that race gets underway in April. Remember, we are on the first day of March today as the Het Volk opens up the semi-classic season in Belgium by tradition.
It's a very tough bike race here, as looks like Chris Peers coming to sign in here right now for Cofidis. David Miller, the man who the team expects to ride well in the Tour de France later in the season, in fact currently being struck down with a bout of glandular fever. There's a big star for Belgium as well, Ludo Dirksen. You can see the bands there indicating he too was a former champion of his country, and always a man who's very aggressive, Phil, when it comes down to these Belgian races. Peter van Petegem, this race goes right past his front door. Nearly every bike race in the Flandrian part of Belgium always goes through Brakel, and that's where this man Peter van Petegem is from. And probably riding in his last year as a professional bike rider, André Schmeel. He's been such a great competitor over the years, threatening to retire after the classic season, and the man, if it does come down to a sprint at the end, likely to put a clean pair of wheels towards everybody, is Tom Steels, another former champion of Belgium.
Yes, suffering from glandular fever now, and he's hoping to come back this time and enjoy himself. And this looks like the arrival of the new champion of Australia, Robbie McEwen. What a great start to the year he has already had. He's the biggest winner so far this year.
And he would certainly love to get himself a victory here at this bike race, because Robbie, in fact, is married to a Belgian.
That's true. Well, there are 25 teams on the line today, and there are 8 riders in every team as they now prepare to roll away and head out 202 kilometres. Welcome to the 2002 cycling season. Let's go. And as we join the action now, we are something like just over 40 miles to go to the finish, and the field bound towards the Molenberg. Robbie McEwen on the front here, looking very good. He's had such a wonderful start to the season back home in Australia, achieving 2 of his ambitions. He won the Circuit Race Championship and he won the actual Road Race Championship. You know, Paul, that Circuit Race, as he only defended the title in the November, then he has to do it again the new year in Australia. I reckon he was the shortest champion of the Criterium last year.
He probably was. That really was rather strange, the dates and the organisation of that, but it's good to see Robbie McEwen over here in Europe with the national champions jersey on his shoulders. A lot of riders moving further forward right now. There are 2 leaders off the front as we go through Mikkelbeck. They have an advantage of 1 minute and 17 seconds, but it is, Phil, I have to say, an absolutely glorious day here in Belgium on the first day of March. It really is quite remarkable for these riders, because very often I've been here in the past and it's been absolutely torrential rain coming down, and I think most of these guys travelling from warmer climes to ride this first race in Northern Europe so far this year.
Good to see the sun shining there as the riders here. That looks like Bortolami sitting in the centre there, and that mauve top to his jersey. These riders got a very good tempo. They've picked up a tailwind at the moment, making full use of it. 1 minute 20 seconds of the breakaway, and we'll be catching up with those very shortly. We are now 70 kilometres from the finish, so there's still a little way to go. The majority of the hills are now behind them. We're heading out towards the Molenberg, which is hill number 10. And then after that they've got a long chase down as we head round. We change direction a little bit as we then set fair for Lokeren and the finish.
Always seems to me to be a very long way from the top of the Molenberg to the finish, and if the break does go away, it very often has a situation where the race comes back together. And with the weather being the way it is today, Phil, I could see us actually having a very big bunch sprint at the end of today's bike race, because this is ideal weather conditions for the start of the season. A lot of riders showing a bit of urgency right now moving forward.
Now let's have a look at this here.
This is Ludo Dirksen, who I think has had a problem at the rear end of the field here, and he's trying to pull himself back up, because it looks as if one of the neutral service cars has gone past there, and in fact he could have been involved in an incident just a few moments ago. But he should be back up and get himself into the main field quite quickly.
So that's a flashback as the breakaway now at 69 kilometres from the finish, 1 minute 36. We'll get up there very shortly as soon as our cameras pick them up, and we'll identify the leaders for you. But that's a huge peloton of riders here, all huddled together, as it were. A lot of action on the front. Dirksons has just tagged on to the back of that bunch, so he's integrated back into the field again. And judging by the field here now of this peloton, this breakaway should start to come down. I suspect they would like to bring everybody back together again by the time they get to the Molenberg climb.
Well, they're going downhill at the moment. It's an 8% descent. These riders are heading down, but you can see there's a main field is pretty well stretched out, so I'm quite surprised to see that the time gap is actually starting to increase once again for the two leaders. And I would think quite shortly, as we get to the more strategic point of this course, there will be a general acceleration in the main field.
I'm just wondering why we haven't managed to get...
In fact, it's Dirksons at the back there, I think, still trying to get himself back into contention with this bike race. You can see how very difficult it is. He's out of the saddle, digging very deep indeed. He's a great bike rider, you know. They started off giving him the nickname of Popeye when he first turned professional, because his ears were sticking out and he used to actually have a shaved head, and he really did look like that cartoon character. But I tell you one thing, when he comes to race in Belgium, he's very serious about his bike racing. Right now, he really is looking to try and get himself onto the tail end of this main field, which I think he has just done at that instant.
Well, it looks as though he's at least going to have the safety of the peloton, because they've eased up a little bit here at the front now and spread out right across the road. Such a typically Belgian situation here. Good road surface, and although it is sunny, it is a bit chilly. 6 degrees, that is not very hot at all. It's about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. As we look here at the field now, just holding nice steady tempo. Stefan Westermann off to the right of our picture there, looking very serious and keeping an eye on things. I get the feeling a lot of riders here are poised and waiting for the last climb. They're putting themselves in the best position to make the move.
Well, everybody's waiting for that. They're waiting for a moment to launch the attack off the front end of this group right now. A lot of movement at the front. This is the action at the back of the race right now, and in fact one man pulling himself back up there is Roberto Petito, wearing number 6 there for Faso Bortolo. Again, had a bit of difficulty, but now he's pulling himself back into the main field. 133 just on the back of the group there as well is Andrea Ferrigato. He's a man who's had a very long professional career, and in fact he was a winner of a World Cup in Leeds many years ago. You can see the movement in the main field right now, Phil. As riders in the middle of that main field are slipping backwards, a lot of riders are moving forward up the front. This looks like Tom Boonen here.
It does. We haven't seen anything of this rider. This is the first ride, I believe, in the colours of US Postal Service. Is that... yes, it could be Tom Boonen here. He's a rider who never saw race as an amateur. He had a wonderful career as an amateur, and in fact Johan Brunel spotted him a while back as Robbie McEwen also moving across. Caught a while back, and Johan decided to give him his chance this time around on US Postal. Big opportunity for this rider.
In fact, I think that was Benoit Joachim. It looked very much like the style there of Tom Boonen. But Benoit Joachim has now got himself into a counter-attack situation there with Robbie McEwen. And McEwen quite resplendent in that white jersey, looking very good and coming off a very good Australian campaign early on in the season.
Now we're getting a little group going away here. It was Benoit Joachim. He's the Luxembourger on the team. And that's a nice strong mover. And McEwen is full of fight here, because here's a man now who has his best form at this time of the year for as long as I can remember, and at 67 kilometres from the finish, anxious to make good use of the form. In fact, Robbie coming here now, he's had wins in the 2 circuit race championships. Don't forget, he got 4 stage wins too in the Tour Down Under, and also he won the Étoile de Bessage. So here we are now, only on the first day of March, and that man already has a clutch of victories under his belt.
It's always something that the Australians try and do, get as much racing in their legs as possible before they come up here to the European climbs, and that I think gives them the edge in the early couple of months of the season. But then after that, if they plan their season out correctly, I do believe that most of them have to take at least a 1-month break before they start to get ready. There's a problem at the back here.
Now what's going on here, because a change of tyres here for the top riders from Team Coast. 123 is Frankie Hoy, and that's a little present for him from Stefan Adamson of Sweden. So he's got his team captain on the way, and now, oh goodness me,
he doesn't look very happy. I think he realises it's a quick and early bar for him today, and he's still waiting for the team car. Let's see if we can get a look at that again. You see the team cars are not right in very close behind the main peloton right now. and immediately this man stopped at the side of the road and
lost the wheel.
Not too quick that at all. That was a little bit of inexperience there, and really, if you're a good domestique, you should have actually helped your team leader there to get the wheel in. That indicates that Mikkelsen is in, and I should say Frankie Hoy is in very good shape today.
Well, that's the feeling, and now he's up there, and he will get back because the pressure on this group, though, he's trying to get away here now, and it's a fine piece of working by these riders. Number 43 here is Nico Eekhout. Had a very good season last year as well. He came good towards the end, and Benoit Joachim flicking his left elbow, saying your turn, and they're all willing to go through at the moment. This is the layout of the breakaway, and it's building all of the time. Mark Wouters is here as well.
It's good to see Mark Wouters getting into this move. He's always a very aggressive bike rider for the Rabobank team, one of the few expatriates making the cross across there to the Dutch Rabobank team. A bit of chaos out on the course right now. You see the race referees are trying to get that neutral service car way out of the road because it looks as if the race is starting to form a very serious counter-attack here. Yes, they're closing in rapidly here, and those motorbikes, far too many motorbikes in that gap. They've caused a bridge as we're in Santa Maria Hollebeke just now, and it looks to me as though that is formed the bridge here. Mark Wouters sitting at the back. Looking in the distance, the peloton still have a very real chance of getting back on terms with this break. As you can see from the helicopter here, they're being hauled back up to bring them back at 66 kilometers to go. I think all of this effort is going to come to naught. It looks as if it's all back together as we speak there. The main field in one big long line at the moment, 65 kilometers to go to the finishing line, and we are hammering out a pretty respectable speed for the early part of the season. This is really one of the first long races, the first semi-classics that most of these riders have taken part in this year. Up until now they've raced in places like the Tour Down Under in Australia, the Tour de Langkawi in Malaysia, and obviously races in the south of France and the south of Spain. But this is the first time when the real important win comes up, because a win in Het Volk is almost like winning one of the big classics. Eric van der Aarden there, great man himself, a former winner of Paris-Roubaix, Tour of Flanders, the prologue of the Tour de France. He's been a great bike rider, Phil, in his career, and now he's looking after the Mapei squad. A chance now to look at the breakaway here with Glenda Hollander. He was sent up to this breakaway with Joni Maxian, who was one of the first to reach it too, and Schweder, Raphael Schweder. He's the team coast rider, 65 kilometers. Very nice little breakaway this for the time of the season. Lovely crowd. We're now heading on to the Molenberg itself, and a bit of a cobbled brute. This is 18%. It might well crack this breakaway. There's a lot of chases going down behind now. We haven't got to let, well, I was about to say we haven't got a time gap. There it is, 1 minute and 22 seconds. Well, this man on the back here is Dario Cioni, wearing number 33, a former mountain bike racer. And he's getting his chance to show off his style here, but at the moment he's finding that the Belgians are much more specialist at this kind of climb than he is. He's having to hang on. That's Raphael Schweder, I think, just in front of him. He's also hanging on for dear life as they rattle over the cobblestones of the Molenberg. The crowd, I've never seen such an orderly crowd for the Belgians, all watching and cheering and seeing the riders go up over the top. The black line of Flanders there was the flag. That's the regional flag, and Cioni here is just hoping that these cobbles end pretty soon before he loses any more. Looks on his side right now. It certainly is. This is the last climb of the day. Cioni just, I think, will manage to reintegrate the group once he goes over the top of this very long and difficult drag. You see right there in front of him one of the riders from Polmans, and I think in fact that was Christophe Trouvé who was having a hard time, and this is the chaos at the bottom of the Molenberg. It is so hard, you see. If you've not got your position at the front, then you are on the defensive all the way up the climb. Now you've got some idea of the time gap there. The leaders are over the top, as this looks like Servais Knaven giving it his best shot here for Domo at the front of the bunch. But you see, I reckon the time gap, well, 55 seconds, that's about right. That's about right for the moment. Stefan Wesemann there was in second or third position, and I don't think he was too keen on the acceleration here coming from the Domo man, and he set up, I think, to allow him to go further forward. But if you are at the back, this is why the guys fight to get into the corners of these climbs as quickly as possible, because it can be absolute chaos.
Well, Servais has got away from the group on the climb here. Meanwhile, at the back, the trainers come to something of a grinding halt for one or two of the riders. I can remember days of Paul Sherwin lying in the ditch on the Kemmelberg in the big races.
In fact, that was the Koppenberg where I fell off, and it really was a very difficult climb to get up. And the Koppenberg this year making its return. There was Paolo Bettini coming across there, and probably, Phil, because of the fact that at the bottom of the Molenberg there was a huge sign from the Belgian fan club of Paolo Bettini. He's come out there and he's actually bridged the gap very rapidly to Servais Knaven, and I would think, well, I would have expected to see a split in the main field with those accelerations, but there are in fact still an awful lot of riders still very close together.
We've still got that break up front, don't forget, with Glenda Hollander in it and Max Chandry. They're keeping it going, they're closing it in slowly. They've gained a little bit of ground on the Molenberg, but they still got to keep on the pressure, otherwise it'll slip away again. These exposed fields now of Flanders here, just outside of Ghent, which is the hotbed of youngsters who go to Belgium to start their careers as young cyclists. Racing there is there's so much of it all week long, especially at this time of the year, right through now until May and June.
I've rarely seen the roads of Belgium quite so dry at the start of the season like this. Even the fields appear to be dry. You just caught this cloud of dust coming up there as one of the cars accelerated by these riders. There's an acceleration on the front there. It looks as if that is probably Peter Farazijn, but this is an incident at the back end of the pack, and it seems as if Jans Koorts, the Dutch national champion, has a problem with his rear tyre.
Well, that's tough because the field is in full flight here. Jans getting his victory last year, and his back tyre has not been on his side today, as you can see for yourselves, and he needs a quick change here because that race is going to pull away from him.
Well, this is going to be a long change right now. It seemed to be an awful long time before the team car got involved with changing that back tyre for him, so I think he may well find himself out of the hunt for the win here at Het Volk today. Pressure on at the front coming from Lotto right now, but a lot of the guys from Cofidis taking part here seem to be fairly aggressive on the front end. A lot of Belgians on the French Cofidis squad here for the race Het Volk. Peter Farazijn wears number 51 for them. Then of course Nico Matin, the big favourite. Chris Peers is in there as well as Joe Plancart. So 50% of the French team today riding for Cofidis are in fact Belgians, and they're always very aggressive. Most of them were originally brought in by Frank van den Broeke when he came to ride for Cofidis, but since his demise it seems as if most of those guys have been pretty happy to stay on board with the French team.
So just look how narrow these roads are here in this part of Belgium. The team cars themselves have huge problems getting through, of course, when there is a problem and they're called to the peloton, but the peloton themselves, the strong men fight to hold those 20-25 positions at the front because of the constant changes of direction, and the weaker ones are forced to the back of the peloton, and you simply never recover from the effort you're making just to stay in the bunch.
Big problem right now as well is after the Molenberg, all of the team cars are going to be a long way behind. They will have had to wait for all of those riders to get over the top of the Molenberg before they get themselves back into the race. So a team car right now could be 2 or 3 minutes behind the main pack, which is why I think that may well be the last we will see of Jans Koorts. Robbie McEwen is there in about 10th position, and that's a jersey we're going to have to get very much used to today.
This looks like Peter van Petegem launching attack off the front, a man of Het Volk. He's won it twice before, and there's been a little crash here. A Palmans rider, he's got forced out onto that muddy stretch and he's gone down, so this is a bit of trouble here for one of the Palmans boys. It looks like Bert Roosums.
Well, you know, this is why you have to be so careful when you do come onto the back end of these groups. He really has pretty much hurt himself, yeah, and I don't think he's going to be up and running very quickly. Let's see how he went off the road there. I think he just changed directions a little bit, and at the back end of the tail, when you're on the rivet, you're just taking a few extra risks, and that man went right over the top, and you can see he's really dirtied the back of his jersey there, so it could be a day to call it quits for him as well for this year's Het Volk.
He's certainly winded. At least he had a soft landing, but there's also a French rider there involved on the Bonjour team, but he got up and carried on. This is the breakaway again now, 38 miles, 60 kilometers to the finish. And this is the front group, Max Chandry second in line. Meanwhile, the back group still finding a lot of work here. They actually look to be going a lot faster than that breakaway group, but the tyre is not telling us they're catching up as they try to keep at least in touch. Although we're over the official climbs, you can see the roads here, the little undulations can hurt the legs as they're trying to keep the effort on, but the bunch, surprisingly enough, is holding it all together.
Peter Farazijn on the front, zigzagging across the road. Servais Carnavin in third position there. Sergei Ivanov in the white jersey there of Fassa Bortola. He looks pretty good. So too does Peter Van Pieting. He's got his teammate there. There's Bettini as well. This is really starting to be a group of the heads of states, really, of the early season classics. I would have to say Robbie must be feeling quite comfortable right now, Phil, because he's got himself over all of the big climbs of the day, and he will be hoping that this group stays together towards the finish, because if it comes down to the bunch sprint, I don't think anybody's going to beat Robbie today.
Robost is where we are. I think you're absolutely right. I've also seen there the other Domo rider, Enrico Cassani. He loves racing in this part of the world. He also is up near the front. He's the third in line as we look at the moment. So we're watching 59 kilometers to go. The gap is coming down, but I'm not sure it's coming down quick enough. These riders are not quite organized in the chase yet, and the bunch is getting a lot smaller now after coming through those S's of the lanes.
Well, as you get onto these small roads, it's very difficult behind, especially this early part of the season. Most of the teams are fairly well represented in front, so it's a question of who is going to chase behind. And this looks like a problem at the back for Lampre as well, because that looks like Ludo Dirksen's once more. And he seems to be having a problem with his knee. Now, it could be that he's actually banged his knee on the handlebars right now, but that, I think, is the end of his chances of winning Het Volk today.
But he certainly isn't happy, and he's come out of that rather select bunch. There's a second group going by him now, and he's just deciding whether to go and try and jump in, and he seems to have gone for that, so he's going to try and stay in the race here. Oh, problems at the front now. We're being held up here at the railroad crossing. I hope somebody's got the watch running, because the rules are quite simple. If you are stopped, and this is the leading group here, if they are stopped, there should be somebody with the watch. There is the man with the board saying the gap was 47 seconds. They should be released at the same time. Here comes the culprit, Eric van der Arden there, taking time out as director sporty to jump out of his car and speak to his team in the breakaway. And he's got a couple of men up front. Now, I wonder if they'll apply the rule correctly, Paul. So often it's not done right, this.
Well, you used to be an international referee, and I thought the rule was something to do if the gap was less than 1 minute, everybody started off together. But it seems as if they are trying to keep the group separate right now, and the referees are in there at the moment.
Okay, well, let's see. Here comes the peloton now. It's very difficult to hold riders back because it's so exasperating, isn't it? But they're trying to give them the countdown of some 40 plus seconds, and then they'll let them ride away again. And I think this time they have stuck pretty much through to the rule book. It's very difficult, of course, to do that. It's the one thing is a level crossing. They don't really know how to deal with it. Now, this means a little stretch of cobbled road here going on for 2.3 meters or 2.3 kilometers. A little bit of rough road. Here's the field getting underway again. So they bounce their way over the level crossing, or the railroad crossing, or the overweg, which is what they call it in Flemish. There's the 113, and that is Sebastian Eno, no relation to the famous Bernard.
It's always very difficult when you've been stopped in a situation like this by the train going by to get the rhythm back into the main field. The breakaway group will get their rhythm going very quickly because they've still got the nervousness and the energy to get themselves organised and pick themselves back up to speed. But it's always a bit of a joke in the main field behind, so I think the next time we get a time check, we may well find that that gap has gone back over the 1 minute margin.
223 is Steven van Maldegem here. He's on this new team, the Lambau Credit team, co-sponsored by Colnago, the Italian bicycle manufacturer, and the leader they brought in is Rolf Sorensen. He seems to have lost his place with the CSC team, where Tyler Hamilton has gone, by the way. We're looking forward to him coming out later on in the races which suit him. The rumour is he's going to take part in the Giro d'Italia as team leader. Well, that would be fantastic.
Well, if he does go there, well, he will have a very good man to look after him. The team manager of that team is Bjarne Riis, and he has a whole host of experience, a professional for a very long time, and of course a winner of the Tour de France. But Maldegem not looking too comfortable here right now, and looking back down the road, I think we will see that the main field certainly have lost a bit of time due to that railway crossing. But this leading group now, Phil, starting to get themselves organised. They must be thinking that they have got a chance of slipping away. Mapei, once again, making a good performance, showing that they are a very strong team, putting 2 riders into the breakaway group there. But here is the main peloton, or what is left of the main peloton, right behind.
Yes, a little steady climb here over that little stretch of cobble road. And having to work very, very hard. You always do on cobble roads. You have to really keep the pressure on. If you lose your concentration, then you also lose about 10 places in the bunch. I noticed Paul Joe Plankett is in this group. He's number 55. You catch him, and that's a good sign for him. This seems to become quite a wall of attrition here. So often nobody knows how their legs are going to react. For many of these riders, it is their first race of the year, and they just don't know what to expect. Not for the man just off camera left. Here he is, Robbie McEwen. He has a clutch of wins that many of these bike riders won't get all year already, and McEwen quite clearly wants to keep this pressure on.
Well, this is Peter Van Petegem just checking a couple of times there to see how his teammate was handling it, and in fact he was just, I think, maybe looking for some help to come from Robbie McEwen, but this acceleration is causing a bit of damage at the rear end of the main field. One or two riders starting to slip up because this long road here, the Paderstraat, is a very long section of cobblestones at 2.3 kilometers. That's almost 1 3/4 miles. Van Petegem has decided now is the time to put the hammer down and try and get rid of a few more of the riders in this group, but he was very attentively checking the position of his own teammate Robbie McEwen, so that may well be what the Lotto tactic is for today, to try and make sure they can keep a reasonable sized group there, and with the form that Robbie McEwen has got, they will maybe try and offer him the victory.
It certainly looks that way just now. This is a fine turn by the two-time winner of this race, Peter Van Petegem. Gritting his teeth, and he's hurting the bunch over the cobblestones. He just loves riding on cobblestones, this man. He is a man for the cobbled races, the Tour de Flanders, which he's also won, of course. Ooh, and he's flicked across that little ditch there with some expertise. You've got to be so careful. Now, what's going on back here? Stéphane Ogier, this is the rider in the picture, and it looks as though, whoa, he was lucky to get round that one.
In fact, he's got round it. It's amazing when you look at some of the performances that these guys put in. It really is like the big motorbike races when you see a guy almost dropping the bike and managing to straighten it up. That guy then, I think his heart rate probably went to 250, but he was able to just keep in control, just get a foot out, probably just touched his foot slightly on the ground to regain balance, and then all of a sudden he was back up and riding again, and he will breathe a sigh of relief tonight, because I tell you one thing, when you fall off on those cobblestones, they seem to be so much harder than the other surfaces that you might fall off on.
The peloton, such as it is, now split here. We're still in search of the leaders. Peter Van Petegem has done a very good turn here, which I think has caused considerable damage at the back of that race. We're still more than 50 kilometers away from the finishing line. Van Petegem coming right up behind the camera motorbike here, which needs to accelerate away. Long stretch here on the cobble roads. Not really bad cobbles, they just start the nerves tingling a little bit. Liepenhovenstraat. There is Robbie McEwen, also looking very, very settled. Chris Peers, I think that goes through as well. Nice little move. These boys just love Belgian cycling.
It's actually Cedric Vasseur on the back. The first time we've seen him this year, Phil, in the Cofidis colours. A transfer across. André Schmiel moving into the group as well. But just to go back to the transfer of Cedric Vasseur, he rode for Lance Armstrong's team last year, and he actually was very verbal during the winter months in his criticism of Lance Armstrong, and he wasn't too happy, I think, because of the fact that he didn't get a selection for the Tour de France last year. But it's always very difficult when you've got a team of 18 or 20 riders to come down to that last man 9 group for the Tour de France in July, and being a Frenchman, he obviously thought he should have been an automatic pick.
Well, and I'm quite sure that Johan Bruneel, as do all of the other directeurs sportifs, they're going to have the same problem all over again this time around as well. Well, the fine pacemaking by Van Petegem over this stretch of cobblestone split the field. They're coming back ever so slowly, but at what cost to their energy levels here? Van Petegem up in that front group. I saw too that Joe Plankett had got there. He was one of the last to come along, but he is in that leading group of these bunches. And the field split here, and it looks as though we're building up now into what could be a very, very precise leading group. So the effort by Van Petegem might be rewarded. Look at the way the groups have just completely split up.
This is the amazing thing about the cobblestones, even what they call good cobblestone sections. You put the hammer down and you can absolutely blow a race to pieces. But what I did notice from that last acceleration of Van Petegem, Robbie McEwen was right on his wheel. I feel certain today that they're trying to do something special for Robbie. Robbie burning learning a little bit, I think, from the non-renewal of his contract last year with Domo Farm Frites. It came to him as a bit of a surprise, really, because he felt that they should have carried on. But that's the way it goes sometimes, and it's very difficult to understand why team managers make certain decisions. But this year, Robbie has certainly come back with a vengeance, and I think he's got the best form that he's had for many seasons.
And he's using it, and you've got to, when you've got it, you use it. And McEwen, not just riding like a sprinter today, he's looking for the move that might decide the race as well. He's been up in the action all day long. A very, very difficult stretch, that 2 or 3 kilometres of rough roads, and paid the price. Who needs hills when you've got cobblestones to do the damage? But you see, they are clawing the way back. Each time they get back together, it looks to me as though the field is just that little bit smaller.
Probably somebody pops off the back each time. In fact, as we get closer to the finish in Lokeren, there are 3 very difficult sections of cobblestones, and that's where very often this race is decided. It gets blown to absolute smithereens. Shamil in there, that looks like the former world champion riding for the Crédit Agricole team.
It's Thor Hushovd, and he's a rider, you know, who's going to come head to head as a challenger to his teammate Stuart O'Grady this year. Those two are developing on the same lines, the young versus the old perhaps, but he looks so strong there. He's trying to bring across the second group to latch up to the first.
Slowly but surely these guys are clawing each other back together. But what this does, Phil, this breaking up of the main field and reforming of the peloton, it really fatigues the riders much more in the early part of the season than maybe later on when we go to races like Paris-Roubaix and the Tour of Flanders. This is the first real long hard race that they will have taken part in this season, and you can see that the second half of the main field is clawing its way slowly to that small nucleus of riders at the front, but again, riders trying to leap off the front end of the main field. I think the best tactic right now would be to actually just hold back and ride in about 8th or 10th position and wait for the cobblestone sections which are still to come. There's a very nasty section of cobblestones at around about 15 kilometers to go, and that would be the ideal place to try and launch a vicious attack. Again, Cedric Vasseur looking very good for his new team. Van Petegem also looking quite comfortable.
Kevin Hulsman's there coming through from for the MAP 18, there he is, and that's a good ride by him, working very hard at the front. Gaps being filled immediately by those with inspirations, and that's a good sign. Peter Van Petegem here, looking strong today and has worked very hard all day today. This is the most interesting move all round here. Lotto are particularly active because this rider here is Glenn de Hollander again. He has been in the thick of the action already today, and now it looks as though he's going to try and do something again. Lotto looking down here, they've got certainly 3 riders at the front group. They've got 4 we know of because the white jersey is Robbie McEwen. And it looks like those little accelerations is holding this breakaway away from the chase. Look at that chase, all in the right-hand gutter.
It's a real hard chase on right now. I think they're just going to pull it back together, but shortly, if they keep this speed up so much, somebody is going to splinter off the front. You can see right now they're actually sitting up a bit. They're moving across the road. Lotto, absolutely right, Phil, have got a very good strong tactical position here right now because there are 4 men in the front. Landbau Credit trying to encourage everybody on the front end of this group right now, and you see how in Belgium these guys are so clever in the way they use the race motorbikes. They switch across the road just to get a slight advantage from those motorbikes if the motorbikes spend too long trying to get themselves that very special photograph.
Well, the car is out of it. The riders are desperate when they're at this stage of the day because they are looking for every possible way of saving energy, hiding behind the others. There is the 49 Belgian winners in the Omloop Het Volk. Only 3 from the Netherlands, 2 from Italy, 1 each from Ireland and Germany. And that is quite amazing, Paul, when you think about it, isn't it? Because they virtually won all editions.
Absolutely remarkable. The 2 times Afgelas, by the way, at the bottom, 1960 and 1986, were when this race was cancelled because of snow. They were unable to have it.
That's right. And Graham Jones rode well in that, by the way, once. He got a 2nd place, British rider, and he was a real talent too. That was a good 2nd place that year.
It really was. The man who took off in 1st place on that occasion was Joseph Brière. I was actually in the group behind when Graham took off, and he rode absolutely superbly. He wasn't able to nail back Joseph Brière, but he stayed in front of the bunch for the last 20 kilometers. And by the way, Phil, I finished 8th on that day.
Oh my goodness, I didn't realise. Oh well.
I know you only used to interview the winners.
No, this is a great race. Anybody that can ride well in these very tough early season races in Belgium usually end up having a pretty good year. That looks like Lars Mikkelsen tapping out the rhythm right now as the leader here of Taconi Sport goes through, so that's got to be
Gabriele Balducci. There's another crash.
Oh dear,
this is
that's
what you
a
have to be
nasty one.
so careful of. Oh, and he's not happy there at all. You see, the road had narrowed out, and that moment there, that rider was just looking to keep himself on the tail of the man in front of him, and it's Arvis Pizix, and somebody, I never even saw this man.
No, this is the one that's quite worrying, and this is a nasty, nasty fall here, because he has gone across that nasty piece of concrete, and his bike is still up to his feet. Now this is a real shame here. Very nasty prang indeed. Well, 2:38, and that's Christophe Stevens of Belgium.
In fact, it was in an accident like this that it put an end to the career of a man by the name of Danny Nelson. That race, in fact, on that occasion was game over again. But just look at this. You're totally on the rivet, just riding on the tail of the man in front of you, and you're not really even looking too far ahead, and that's exactly what happened to these guys here. And he certainly was expressing his disgust at the bollards in the middle of the road.
Well, I hope he's okay, because that's a rather nasty fall. I don't think, in fact, he did fall into that stone. I think he went right over the top of it, so he should be okay. But that was a nasty tumble indeed. But as I was just saying, when you get to a race which is fully committed like this, riders do desperate things, and they just actually lock onto the wheel in front and just hope they can hold it. 50 kilometres to go now. We're looking here at the Hepvolk first big race of the season in Belgium on the first day of March 2002. Still very much anybody's race. Peter van Petergem is looking extremely good, mixing it up here, and there's another attack gone off the front there from the Lambau Credit team. One or two riders gesticulating.
Did you see that? Joe Plancard's actually trying to get everybody organised, because they were riding right down the side of the road and not able to organise a good echelon. Joe Plancard, very good tactical move by him, saying, come on guys, let's ride down the right hand side of the road, get ourselves a good echelon, then we're not all begging for position in the slipstream right now. Shamil, tough bike rider, this man. He's changed his nationality as many times as I've changed my shirt. He started off as a Ukrainian, he was a Russian, and then he was a Moldovan, and now finally I think he's going to settle for the Belgian nationality, and it would be good to see him put in a fine performance during the one-day classics coming up. And the main field, I think, Phil, now starting to get themselves just a little bit more organised. A lot of white jerseys on the front there. That'll be Faso Bortolo. They have had an absolutely fantastic start to the season. Their man Andrea Pataki has won almost as many races as Robbie McEwen.
Well, and in fairness here, this has been a very hard race at the moment. It was Cassani for Domo who was driving. It's unusual for an Italian to be part of a Belgian setup, but that's the case at Balakum. And these are the riders now from the Telecom team who are also trying to break in. Stefan Schreck, the German rider. There's Cassani. Lots of work being done here now. This is Robert Petito of the Italian team on Fassa Bortola, being relieved at the front there by Fabio Baldato.
Baldato himself having a very good start to the season as well. In fact, they've spread it around quite a lot in the Fassa Bortolo team. They really have worked well over the first 1 month of racing. It seems as if these guys have been racing forever right now, but there have been so many victories throughout the month of February that these guys, many of them, are super competitive right now.
Well, this can't go on for long at these sort of speeds without the elastic braking. There's some same names all the time moving in and doing the work at the front, but they are totally committed to a flat-out race here, and this is a really good bike race to watch just now. Kim Kirschen going through now. He's the lone Luxembourger on the Italian Fassa Bortolo team as he tries to go through, and they're going to surely bring back this split.
Well, they haven't done just yet. Two guys from Team Coast on the back there. This is Laszlo Bodrogi wearing number 32. The two guys from Team Coast at the back there seem to be having a quick chat about the success of this breakaway right now, and we saw him at the start, and here he is right now, Rolf Sorensen, looking very good. And I wonder, Phil, what went on between him and Bjarne Riis with that CSC Tiscali team? Maybe a clash of the titans.
Well, you know, Rolf wanted a good contract and probably a reasonable salary, and I think Bjarne says, Rolf, you're getting a bit too old for a good salary, and they tended to have gone their separate ways. But just in time, Rolf has got himself a team leader of another team, and he's going to ride for at least 1 more year. Just saw Robbie McEwen go through in that gap. Tor Hoshov is there, that big man in the green Crédit Agricole team jersey. Cofidis are well numbered up here. I would say Cofidis and the Lotto, with especially with Andre Schmil now here. There's Paolo Bettini, here's McEwen. This is going to become a battle between perhaps Mappe, Lotto, and Fassa Bortolo.
By the way, that rider on the right-hand side there, don't worry too much about him. The problem with racing in Belgium is that you're never really very far away from the start or the finish, and that man there, in fact, is riding gently but surely back to the finishing line, I think. And there's a little discussion going on here, and it looks very much as if this man from Landbouw Credit, Stefan van Maldegem, is sitting up and he's going back to the main field. In fact, I wasn't so sure, Phil, whether or not he was in the breakaway early on when we had that little incident at the railway crossing, and it seemed as if somebody leapt across into the front brake.
That could have been what's happened, and the commissaire said, "I'm sorry, but you shouldn't be here," and he's put him back in his place. It's certainly not unprecedented at all, is that? Quite likely that's happened. Just giving us a little smile. There's Chris Piers. He's turned in some very good performances in his career too.
Max Chiandri there for Lampre, he's looking pretty comfortable too. That is still the neutral service vehicle coming up here to look after these riders, so that indicates the gap is still hovering around the 30-second mark. There's no real decision being made in this bike race just now. Husford, he's a big bike rider, isn't he, Phil? I reckon he's going to be a serious man over the next couple of years. Got the World Championships bands on his shoulders. Team Coast, another team in this race here, will be looking to put in fine performances over the next couple of months of this season to try and get themselves selection for the upcoming Tour de France. It is so important for a team and a sponsor, and although that time gap, Phil, was given at 25 seconds, I would say it might be just stretching out once again. It's officially given at 28, but it's very difficult right now for this main field, who are hammering along at around about 45 kilometers an hour, to actually nail it back. And the reason the main field is riding so hard is because one big team has failed to make the presence in that leading group. It's the team that regards itself as the best Belgian team, Domo Farm Frites, and they won't be too happy, Phil, about the fact there are a lot of Lotto riders in the breakaway.
No, they've got to get up there, there's no doubt. I must say that Max Chiandri may have read this right, because he was in the original break and now he's been picked up, but this is a serious move and he's still up here, and that's a good move by the Lampre rider. And same too for Stefan de Jong. Rabobank, he's a good sprint finisher. This is the breakaway here, and this is Ralph Grabsch now. This is number 12 there, is Stefan Schreck. They're working so well together and keeping the speed nicely poised, but they're not getting away at 28 seconds. 46 kilometers yet to go. That's about 28.5 miles.
Right now, I would think if we look down along this line, we might find a rider with the number 14 on his back, Danilo Hondo, and that could be why the team from Telecom are so active at the front end of the main field. There's Christian Moreni, rides for Alessio. Danilo Hondo would be the fastest man in this bike race, not racing here Eric Zabel, the man who is the top sprinter. But I think they're starting now, Phil, to groom Danilo Hondo for a top position in the team later on in the year, when maybe Eric Zabel doesn't take part in the Vuelta at the end of the season. Zabel's such a brilliant bike rider, and I've always got a lot of time for Eric Zabel, because he's competitive from the very start of the season right up until the end. Although he hasn't had a great start so far, he's probably preparing himself for a crack at Milan-San Remo.
Oh, Moreni there, not interested in going through in the line, and in fact Kim Kirchen there looking over his shoulder and saying, hang on a minute, I've just done one turn, where have you been? And so he's come up and taken his place.
That's a good sign for the leading group. It's been such a hard chase for a long number of kilometers right now, and they certainly have never been able to reduce that gap at all. Eventually, if it stays like this, they will probably find themselves giving up, because the firepower will move away from this chasing group. For the moment, it still looks good for them, because there are three big strong teams prepared to do the pacemaking at the front. And I tell you, it's so hard, Het Volk, at the start of the season to go out here and really put the hammer down for a long period of time like this. A lot of the bodies are not quite ready. There was another rider coming back from the breakaway group right there. You see the group at the front of the bike race, Phil, are still fairly well organised, although it does seem as if we have lost one or two riders from the back end of that group.
Well, it's sort of two breaks this. The leading break collapsed and was joined just after the Molenberg by the strong men. And Peter Van Petegem, don't forget, is up there, as is Robin McEwen now. And they literally rode away from this breakaway over the cobblestones on flat roads. There is Rolf Sorensen again going through. And it is amazing, you know, that they've not managed to bring this back. This is Max Chandry, still looking pretty cool. First race of the year for him, and he's got himself in a very, very good move.
Joe Plancard for Cofidis just dropping back there a few moments ago. This is Laszlo Bodrogi. Cofidis really 50% Belgian at the start of today. The team always riding very well in these North of France and Belgian classics right now. The group there, the leading group in this bike race, looking very organised, tightly knit, everybody sharing the pacemaking at the front, which is why the three big teams who are chasing in the group behind are having such a hard job actually nailing back that gap. There you can see there are 5 sections of cobblestones left to go: the Koningsstraat, Beringstraat, Steenbeekstraat, the Volkerzaanstraat, and then a last little section just on the outskirts of Lokeren. And that is where I think, if this group stays clear, it will absolutely explode, and there'll be small groups of 3 and 4 bike riders. But everybody right now, Phil, is contributing to the success of this move. And I think with Lotto present, with a lot of riders, Cofidis with a lot of riders too, it's going to be very hard right now for that group to make the integration.
It's going to be really hard. I'm just thinking there are such lovely names they sound in Flemish. The Vogelstandstraat. I guess that means the Birdsong Street.
Vogelstandstraat. Very long and sweet road if you're a man who's good over the cobblestones. A man like Peter Van Petegem. You can see the red jerseys in this group there sitting at the back, because they are hoping that if it all does come back together, they will be fit enough to make the counter attack. Gerolsteiner lending a hand at the front there now on the left hand side. Fassa Bortolo looking very good and very drilled now, but it is a tight-knit group. It really is one group of about 10 riders chasing another group of about 10 riders, and everybody else in this group really now just moving along for the ride.
Tough race to judge, but obviously this has been a very competitive Volk for the start of the year, and you're going to need good legs to be able to do anything about it. Sat at the back here in the slight bulge of the peloton, those riders are just about fit to hang on, I would think. If they put their nose out into the wind, then they really can't do anything about it. They go back into the line again. There's a nice diagonal echelons forming now, just a light wind coming from the top left of our picture, forcing the riders into that oblong diagonal line across the road. It's beginning to nose away too at 41 seconds. There'll be confidence up front, I would think. 43 kilometers now from the finish.
Bad for the morale of the guys in the second group once they see that gap starting to increase slowly but surely as we head now through the town of Weteren. If it gets up to the 1 minute mark, then I feel the morale will grow out of this group. That's Fabio Baldato there, just moving into second place. He's a great bike rider, always ridden very well in the Tour of Flanders. He's had a second and a third place in that great race. But right now the big losers, I have to say, are Domo Farmfrieds. They are the team that regard themselves as the top team in Belgium. But this year I would have to say I think Lotto have had a much better start to the season.
Just saw Servais Knaven, last year's winner of Paris-Roubaix, go through. He really is fighting at the front there, but he's taking it hard at times. Huge efforts being made. This is a very committed case here, but chase rather, by the riders on them. Just look at the determination on their faces here. They drive it, they take the line through. Once they're through, they swing off. This is Cassani again, this little hard worker Italian on the Domo. Through and off is the way to go today. No big long turns. They just want to do enough to make it hurt, and then they've got such a good working group here. And when you see a group work like this, I can't see how this breakaway can stay away. It's now down to 39 seconds. Great things helicopters, we can see very easily where they are. They're just around that corner, possibly out of sight as the peloton came round the other side of the S. 42 kilometers covered thus far. There is the breakaway. A little bit of a free wheel going on the back. If they lose their impetus, the back field will be on them so quickly now. There's an awful lot of teams represented here. That's why the chase is being conduced just by a handful of teams like Fassa Bortolo, Domo Farmfrieds. Amazingly, they have missed out putting a man in this breakaway. Rabobank have some great riders up here, including Mark Wouters, who has become an absolute star in his own right, really, these days, and is doing so well on his own reputation rather than on somebody else's. Henrik van Dijk is this rider here. Moving over now to the Mapei rider, and that's Kevin Hulsmans, who's got himself into a good move. 123 there, that is Frankie Hoy. Now you remember Frankie Hoy was the man who changed bikes with his teammate with that flat back tyre. Here we have Frankie Hoy now in this breakaway. That's a very, very good move, and it just shows you the confidence placed in him at the start today by his team, because they knew when he punctured to give him the wheel, and he's got into this breakaway. Little shake of the head here by Joe Plankard. I don't really know why. This breakaway working well.
Well, I think I'll tell you one thing. Joe Plankard wants people to keep pushing the gap, come down just a little bit more. Robbie McEwen on the far side there in the white jersey with the yellow and green bands across it, champion of Australia. He must be feeling very happy with the situation right now. But it actually seems, Phil, as if there's a certain amount of impetus going out of this leading breakaway. I thought they were going to walk away with it when it got up to almost the 1 minute mark, but right now it seems as if they're all thinking about the next section of cobblestones which are about to come up. Again on the far side there, another man who probably abandoned a little bit early on in today's stage. The speed is still, though, very high indeed in this group, but I think if they can just hold on for another 5 or 10 kilometers, they may well break the camel's back. And look at that, back to the main peloton, it's a 3-minute margin.
Well, seeing Stephen de Jong here be passed by Robin McEwen, those two riders used to clash in their amateur days in what was really a tour of the east coast of Australia, which was held every October time, and they were both regular stage winners in that event. Now of course here they are, top professional bike riders.
Joe Plankard is in this group, Cedric Vasseur as well. And
yes, Coffers has done well, haven't they, really, placing all these riders in this leading group. And I cannot understand how some of the big teams, primarily Fassa Bortolo, Telecom, have missed out, and so also the Domo Farm Fritz team, of course, and that's the team of Johan Museu.
Well, it's surprising to see Domo missing out. Not surprisingly enough, the other two teams, because they're not from Belgium. But Domo Farm Fritz regards themselves as the top team on the block here, and very often regards the Lotto squad as the lesser looked after brother. But right now the lesser looked after brother has got a lot more bike riders in the front end of this main field. 37 kilometers to go, and it's amazing how long this chase has been on and how close the gap has been, yet they've never yet, Phil, been able to actually nail it down. Sometimes the last 30 seconds is almost impossible to close.
It is amazing, and I think it's got to be put down to the fact this is the first big race of the year and they haven't got quite honed form just as we speak. But there are some good bike riders in that breakaway as well. Here's the relationship to the chase, and this is what we've looked at now for kilometre after kilometre. This group has split, regrouped, split again as I speak. 4 riders now trying to get away off the front. Time is beginning to run out too, around about 23 miles to the finish now, and they're still trying to work out how they're going to reach that front group.
Well, once you see that start to happen at the front end of the main field, you get an idea that it's almost time to throw in the towel. These guys are starting to really get tired now, starting to weaken, having put in such a long, hard chase and having not actually got anywhere. They've had it as close as 25 seconds. They've had it as far out as almost 1 minute, but they've never actually been able to completely close that gap right now. And there are in this group, Phil, an awful lot of passengers, men who are not contributing at all, and that will slowly but surely start to play on the minds of these men doing all of the work on the front. You see the flick of the arm there from the Fassa Bortolo rider. He wants the next line to come through, but in fact the line is only 4 riders long, and it looks in the main field now as if the group is starting to sit up.
It's going to be a lot longer. In fact, they're about to hook up again, and then it's all back together again. Now Gerald Steiner here also with no men up there. At least there's so many riders here willing to work. They're thinking long term, of course. They say, right, if we're not going to win this race, we're going to have a good workout and get some form for future races, because only racing brings on the edge to your ability. This looks like the style too of Servais Knaven. If it isn't, then it's Enrico Cassani, who's been a real workhorse for this team.
Well, the gap still hovering there. It will get a lot more difficult as we get closer to Lokeren, because there are some very difficult sections of cobblestones left to go, and that I think is where this race is literally going to explode. We'll see riders all over the countryside of Belgium when they do get to the next sections, and the man who's been looking the strongest in the leading group, really, Peter van Petegem. But I think today the tactic of Team Lotto will be to look after Robbie McEwen, who's proved to be such a fast bike rider since the start of this season, so that would obviously be the move for them. The last time they went over a long section of cobblestones, it seemed as if Van Petegem wanted to pace Robbie McEwen across the stones, and when they came out, that's when this real front group started to form.
Superb effort. I'll just give you those names up there. Van Petegem's up there with Robbie McEwen, Andre Schmill and Glenda Hollander, and that is 4 riders. I'll tell you a little funny story about Glenda Hollander. It's a very strange name, a capital D apostrophe capital H, and the way I say it in English, of course, Glenda Hollander was listening to me commentate in Australia, and he came up and he said, "You must stop calling me Glenda." But he was only joking, because it must sound like to him I'm calling him Glenda Hollander.
He's a good guy. He's definitely a very nice bike rider. He has progressed through the ranks. He started off as a professional, Phil, with the small Vlaanderen 2002 team, and eventually progressed to get himself a very good slot on the top Lotto squad. And right now he I think will be looking very seriously at the possibility of a win for Lotto right now. But what a great coup that would be if Cofidis could get themselves the win here. They've got 3 riders in this leading breakaway. Very good man in Joe Plancart. He's got a great sprint when it comes down to the end, although Joe seems to be using an awful lot of nervous energy, looking back and shouting at other riders. They're going through there. Andre Schmiel looking very comfortable right now. Henrik van Dijk in there as well for Polmans Koolstrop. A small team, but always capable of being competitive in the Belgian races, which for them is exceptionally important.
That's the ones they want to be competitive in, that's absolutely right. Chris P is going through on the Cofidis team. He celebrates his 32nd birthday in 2 days' time, so that would be a nice present for him. He's been a very good bike rider, some great results. He had a great season last year. We started off with a 6th place in the Tour of Flanders and a 7th place in Ghent-Wevelgem, and then he followed that with a 9th in Paris-Roubaix and a 10th place in the Amstel Gold Race. So he had a wonderful opening classic season, and he's searching for that same form. There he is, the bottom of these 3 Belgian riders here. Van Petegem and Schmiel, McEwen the Australian, of course, and there he is, Glenn de Hollander, also in this breakaway. Joe Plancart, Cedric Vasseur, these are all the riders. Some of them were already in the lead when the chase group came up, and they mingled together. Some got dispatched backwards, and we've settled now for what is quite a nice large bunch, and seemingly they're riding at exactly the same speed as the chase, and they're not getting any closer behind, maybe 1 or 2 seconds, but that really is nothing right now.
Nothing at all right now. Inside 18 miles to go to the finish. They're starting to get themselves organised once again as they go through Wichelen, and I think if they can just hold on for another 4 or 5 kilometres, I think they'll find that gap will all of a sudden just explode to a minute or 2 minutes. When you have a long chase like that in the early part of the season, it is so very difficult, as you said, Phil, for the guys to keep it going for more than an hour and a half, because right now the body is not completely tuned for this kind of long-term power output that these men are having to put in at the moment.
Well, it's the furthest race most of them will have raced, if they've raced at all this year, over 200 kilometres, 126 miles, and around the average distance for a race, unless it is a World Cup Classic, and then we go up to around 250 to 260 kilometres. The gap has suddenly reversed again now. Look at this, we've gone the other way to 36 seconds in favour of the breakaway. So they're working well together. I don't think there's many passengers on this group, and Joe Plancart must be feeling a bit more content now. I haven't seen him gesticulating at the riders for a while.
Well, that's because everybody's working fairly well together, and they know that they're slowly but surely holding off the main field, and the longer they survive and the closer they get to the next section of cobblestones, the more likely this breakaway is to succeed. But in fact, just to clarify that little situation we had on the road a few moments ago, there are 2 Landbau credit riders in this leading group. One of them is Rolf Sorensen, the other is Michael van Hack, and in fact we are getting information that Van Maldegem was taken out by the race referees because, yes, in fact, he did slip across the gap at that incident we had with the railway crossing. When they restarted the race, he was supposed to remain in the main field, and he leapt across the gap. It took the referees a little while to organise themselves, but they did spot him and eventually asked him to, "Excuse me, son, get to the back."
And apparently he's been disqualified for attempting to get into the breakaway, so that was a bit hard this time of the year. I thought they might have just sent him back to the chase group, but that's not the case. Anyway, 38 seconds is the gap, beginning to look a little bit more creditable on this long straight road. Andre Schmiel here, getting a little bit long in the tooth now. He'll celebrate his 40th birthday very shortly, but next January to be absolutely precise. But you're looking at a rider here now who is coming to the end of his career. He said he will retire this year. It's unclear whether he will retire, as he hints he will, at Paris-Roubaix, a race which he won, or whether, because the race World Championships are in Belgium, whether he might go through until the World Championships.
Well, it's a tough question for him to make, but the thing is, at the end of the day, he has been such a tough bike rider through the years. You know, his face looks like he's carved out of steel. Well, the only man I can remember racing at this level for such a long time was Joop Zoetemelk. He won the Tour de France in 1980, and he was either 38 or 39 years of age when he won the World Championships. Yeah. And he actually rode the World Championships at 40 years of age, and the international governing body actually had to change the rules, because in those days it was illegal for a rider over 40 to ride the World Professional Championships.
Too dangerous for the aging heart, I suspect, was the thinking behind that. But of course, there's World Championships for every age group these days, with all of the Masters competitions around the world, and not just in cycling but in most sports too. The Mapei boys, led by Hulsmans, working out, and Bettini, the team captain here near his camera. Thor Hushovd, he's gone through, the Norwegian rider, followed by Robin McEwen, the champion of Australia. It is a very, very good breakaway for those willing to have the legs and work today. Don't be deceived by the blue skies. Watch out for the long sleeves. Hushovd's a brave boy, pushing down his arm warmers, and McEwen doing no such thing. It is quite a chilly day just now.
It's a chilly day, but for these bike riders, I think they will have rejoiced this morning when they looked out of the hotel bedroom and saw that there were no clouds and there was no rain coming out over the Flandrian roads, because when it does rain around here, it is a very difficult bike race, and those roads where we've seen one or two crashes in the dry are made absolutely treacherous by the thin coating of mud which goes across them, and it really would have been disaster on the cobblestone sections. But even so, the pacemaking of Peter van Peter on those cobblestone sections is having just the same effect on this leading group of bike riders right now.
This has been a totally full-on attack, this. Everybody scrambling to stay away, saving nothing. Here comes the grand old man, André Schmil. Just at a short turn, refuses not to, but doesn't do a long one and drops back in. So Belgium's highway traffic there going underneath the bridge, because the barge traffic here on the canals of Belgium is still very much part of the industry of this country, and they use those barges, of course, to sail off into Holland or into Germany, where they most of the people are privately owned boats, and they work on a sort of freelance basis, picking up their cargo and dropping it off in another country. Eidberger now, 49 seconds. At last, the elastic is stretching and getting a little bit thin.
I think they may well have done it just now. They've been pushing for a long time. It's a long time that I can't remember having seen such a long, hard chase to pull back a breakaway group. Robbie McEwen must be feeling very confident right now, but what he does have to do is get himself over the next few sections of cobblestones. Good to see Paolo Bettini in this leading breakaway as well, because he is a man who is one of those rare riders, Phil, these days, who is competitive right the way through the season. So many riders have to pick specific goals. Men like Lance Armstrong, we see Lance come out at specific dates during the year to try his form, to make sure that he's on form, on the pinnacle of his form for the month of July. But there are a few rare riders, and I have to really say that I've got huge respect for men like them. My greatest hero when I was racing, I think, had to be Sean Kelly, because Kelly would race in February and he was still up there in the Tour of Lombardy at the end of October.
Yeah, and you always admire those people, but enthusiasm, that's the thing. He just loves riding his bike. Here comes Cedric Vasseur, a man of northern France. He lives up this way across the border, of course, because we're in Belgium today. McEwen has come to the back for a breather, and this is Max Chiandri just flashing down through the camera there. Little stretch of cobblestones, but nothing too severe, and it's all over for them now. 51 seconds.
The long shadows coming from the sun here as we go through Overmeer around about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Look at that, the average speed that these guys are going right now is around about 50 kilometers an hour. I think now they may well just have done it. It has been such a long, hard chase, but they are nudging once again up to the 1 minute mark, and I think once it goes through the 1 minute mark, it will literally explode, and that gap will jump to around about 2.5 minutes. And then these men have to sit back and think about the tactics over the next few cobblestone sections, because they are very long and difficult, and will certainly suit men like Peter van Petergem and André Schmil.
There's a nice picture. A team car, the breakaway and the motorcycle. as they course their way through the Belgian countryside at just over 15 miles from the finish. One gets the feeling this break is the one, but they're going to have to work very, very hard to hold it, because there are 3 teams back there with no riders in it, and that, if anything else, is embarrassing to them, not to put at least one man in this front group. And if they don't put anybody in, then they've no choice but to ride to try and bring this breakaway back. Sharp right-hander here for the riders.
These are always precarious in Belgium. These corners are very, very dangerous, and if you're not from this part of the world, you have to make a point of riding very close to the front. The Belgians know where they are. We're now coming up to the Kasseien, which is the Belgian word for cobblestones, of Overmeer Koningsstraat, the King Street. It's only 700 meters long. In a couple of cobblestone sections time, there is a very long section. I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't Peter van Petegem on the front, followed there by Joe Planckaert.
And he scores the, look at this, he scores the splits again.
And Robbie McEwen seems to have missed out.
Well, in which case he wants to turn off the power, because McEwen is his man. He's checking on what's going on behind. But Pete Van Petegem is such a brilliant man on the cobbles. He gets on the top, he stands hands on the top of the handlebars, and he powers over the cobblestones. And again, he is hurting the breakaway quite considerably here.
Looking down the line, I can't actually see Robbie McEwen. He may well have had a bit of difficulty there. He's had a great start to the season, but you know, it's very often the case when you ride so well, you get caught out, especially when the pressure is put on you by the team. Coming forward right now, this is actually Chris Pearce who's come forward, and a great acceleration by him. And Petegem there in second position. Andre Schmeel must certainly be right to the front of this bike race as well. They're off this section of cobblestones, and the speed is dramatic.
Well, Piers there was actually trying to hook up with our motorcyclist, but he's got out of the way. That looks as though it might well have stretched a little bit. It looks like McEwen tagged onto the back of this line again. He's still here, but look at this, Paul. This bunch must have split here. Where's the rest of them? Here we go. Let's have a look. A complete split, and they've got rid of 7, 8, 9 riders in desperate trouble by the efforts there by Piers and Van Petegem.
Well, that was the move that Lotto wanted. They wanted to reduce the numbers in this group. They wanted to get as fewer riders as possible coming off the cobblestone section, and they will now realize they don't have too many more passengers. I think that will be their tactic over the next couple of cobblestone sections as well, to try and reduce the men in the front group there by at least half. The gap now back to the main group behind is still the 50-second mark, but we're getting so much closer to these cobblestone sections right now that I think it's pretty much goodbye to the group behind. The winner must certainly come from this group or the group that is chasing right now.
Well, there's McEwen, the small man in that group. So I think he's here. This is Glenn de Hollander sitting on the back, the Lotto rider. Lotto, I think, have kept all the men in the group, which is an incredible situation. Paolo Bettini has also stayed up here, which is an interesting move because he's in a good position. 25 kilometers to go now. Well, we agree with that. That's about 15 and a bit miles to the finish.
Joe Planckaert there as well, still in the group, not very happy at all, looking over his shoulders. What's going on? Are those riders starting to get back on, or shall I go to the front and do a few more hard turns? There's the other Landbouw Krediet rider, Michael van Haken. He's in the group. If I can get a look further forward, I can't see Rolf Sorensen in this group right now, so he may well be one of the victims of that last acceleration.
Well, this is the other Landbouw Krediet rider in this breakaway. Are we at the back of the group here now, Paul? No, we're in the group. This is Michael van Haken. That's a bit of a good ride by him. He's a very good Kemes rider, but I wouldn't have expected to see him featuring quite so well today. Now, what was Bettini doing there?
I think Bettini doesn't want to go to the front, basically.
Oh, well, that's a
He's
good
pushing
move.
all the Belgians to the front and saying, well, come on, guys, this is your race. We're in Het Volk, the race of the people. You ride at the front, and I'll just have a little cruise at the back here because I'm thinking about my pizza for tonight. But don't be fooled by a man like Paolo Bettini, because he has got the ability to launch a vicious attack towards the end, and it may well be that he's waiting for the cobblestone sections. He's ridden this bike race before. He knows how tough it is on the run-in. Here is confirmation of that group. Bettini and Hulsmans are in there for Mappé. De Hollander is there as well as Schmeel, Van Petegem and McEwen. Still 4 men. Chris Peers and Joe Plankart are in there for Cofidis. Frankie Hoy has made it. Hendrik van Dijk is in there for the Polmans team, and Van Heek is in there for the Landbau Credit. But there's not much time between them and the group behind, just a mere 11 seconds.
Well, a nice little mixture, and we've got two splits now, as you can see. 11 seconds to the rest of this group. It's not that far, and 50 seconds backward to the next group. Little bit surprised that we managed to rid ourselves there of the man from Crédit Agricole, Thor Hushoft, and we just got a glimpse of him now trying to get them back on terms. He's off to our left. There he is.
That only can be put down to a lack of experience in these early season races. It's his third year as a professional. He was in fact World Under-23 time trial champion. Had a brilliant season last year with 8 wins. He's already had a high place in the overall standings this year in the Étoile de Bessèges, one of the first big races of the year down in the very south of France. But I think if he rides alongside Robbie McEwen, I should say Stuart O'Grady, for a few more years, I think he will learn an awful lot.
Well, the peloton, I don't think we've seen in the whole race, but they're placed at 6 minutes now. We've always had a little group off and chasing. What was the original breakaway, brought back, joined by the chase. We split the group up again now as we come to 23 kilometres to go. André Schmil, the grand old man, really has his head screwed on, does just enough to earn a little bit of respect from the others, and then drops back.
Drops back there. A quick look at the face of Robbie McEwen. He'll want to know how McEwen is riding. McEwen, a new man on the Lotto squad this year, and I think they've been very happy with his performances so far. Lotto have done the great move here, Phil. They've got 4 riders in this leading group, which I think is around about 11 riders strong. We're coming through Kalken right now, and that is a good move. They have got to be in the best tactical position. There is Frankie Hoy. He too is looking quite comfortable in this group, but they must keep the pressure on still, because that split is only around about 10 seconds behind them. Look at the face of Joe Plankart there. He really is suffering right now, and he'll be looking for this group to... Ooh, they caught out the motorbikes there. You see, the motorbikes have to slow down so much as we come into this next section of cobblestones, the Kaseya of 500 meters in length at Kalken Beringstraat. It's a short section. The next section is a very long section, and I think we'll really see the hammer come down from Lotto. Robbie is not in the ideal position there, sitting at the back of the group, but it's his teammates who'll be doing all of the work on the front.
Beringstraat all set to have a nice little grand fete when we've gone through. They're going to have a bit of fun and games, waiting here for the passage of the circuit Het Volk. Het Volk, by the way, is the sponsoring newspaper. It used to be called Ghent Ghent, and now the race is Ghent Lokeren. 22 kilometres to go, and nobody looking over the shoulders. They feel this is it now, and they're going to keep the pressure on. There are 11 riders in this breakaway. Quickly give you the names again: Peter van Petegem, Robbie McEwen, André Schmil, Glenda Ollender, all Lotto, Michael van Heek of the Landbau Credit, Joe Plankart, Chris Peers of Cofidis, Frankie Hoy of Coast, Paolo Bettini and his teammate Kevin Hulsmans of Mappe, Hendrik van Dijk of Palmans. They are the men who've made the split, and the boys they left behind are losing ground just a little bit now.
Chris Peers coming through right now for Cofidis. These guys now know they've got a serious option on the victory at the end of the day. Van Dijk, by the way, there for Polmans, is a very good bike rider in the sort of semi-classic Belgian races. He was a previous winner of the Grand Prix E3. I think, however, looking at Shamil's face there, he's starting to feel the pain just a little bit, although Van Petegem coming through there looks a lot more comfortable. Larne, by the way, is just on the outskirts of Ghent, and one of the best 6-day riders of recent years used to live here, a man by the name of Etienne de Wilde. And hard to believe that he was racing up until this last winter, Phil, because I actually raced with Etienne de Wilde on the La Redoute team.
He's even older than André Schmil, I think, and he's only just retired, but a great bike rider. Extremely good track rider, became a world champion on the track when he was way past what everybody thought was his retirement age. But that's not the point. The fact is he won the world title. Now we're looking at the breakaway here, stretching out to 23 seconds. They must begin shortly to feel a bit confident. They've had to work so hard for this at a time of the year when they can't have the racing experience they would like, but it's going to stand them in such good stead when the season opens up again, as it will from now on, of course. Frankie Hoy is going to thank his teammate, I think, for the back wheel, because he's put himself in this lead group. And when you've got an old man like André Schmil, who doesn't know what's going to happen when he comes out, here he is. He reads a race so uncannily well, and he's got himself into the breakaway.
Well, he's a good bike rider, but he hasn't had a win for a couple of years right now. But I think maybe that will change now that he's comfortably a well-installed member of Team Coast. Team Coast, a team looking to try and bring themselves right up into the top of the first division and hopefully get themselves selection for the Tour de France. Now another section of cobblestones here, looking out down the road. That time gap of 23 seconds I think has stretched out a lot further than that right now. In that group is Rolf Sørensen, and once again onto the cobblestones, 600 meters in length, the Steenbergerstraat, the Kaseya, that's what the Belgians call the cobblestones. And when you get up the Kaseya, you know that the Belgians are really going to put the hammer down, which is what they're doing right now. McEwen seems to be in a spot of bother at the back there with his teammate De Hollander just in front of him, and that's probably because if we could flick to the front end there, we would probably see the train of André Schmeel and Peter van Petegem.
Looking at the back wheel here, Robbie McEwen. He's got his half legs on today because it was very chilly at the start, taking no chances, keeping those muscles nice and warm. And there's been big crowds around this course wherever it's been possible. They've packed the bends. Roads closed, of course, as we course our way right around here, the Flanders area of Belgium, hotbed of cycling in Europe. This is the leading group, and this is the group now. It's Kevin Hulsman's nearest camera. André Schmeel just in front there, crouched over his bicycle. Glenn De Hollander, they're all in this group of 4 Lotto riders here. Numerically, they're in a very strong position as we go into the last 20 kilometres, because I would think that we might well see a flurry of attacks from the lot.
Frankie Hoy's gone. Frankie Hoy is gone. He's not going to wait at all. And in fact, while the Belgians were actually setting the big hard tempo, Frankie Hoy must have been sat in 2nd or 3rd position. Once we got onto a good stretch of road, he's launched this big attack. And in fact, you could see Schmeel was suffering there to try and pull him back. Now that's a great way to hit them. Now let's not forget, this race over the years, as you said earlier, Phil, has been totally dominated by the Belgians. There are a few foreigners in this break. One man they need to watch out for the counter-attack coming from is number 31 there, Paolo Bettini, but that was a very hard and well-placed attack by Frankie Hoy.
Well, a difficult decision now, because there'll be some infighting starting amongst the teams behind. He's got no teammates to block for him, so the teams behind are going to have to see who is going to take up the chase. The arguments are going to start, I think.
These two teams need to work hard. They need to work as one right now. Cofidis, who've got a lot of riders in the group. Joe Plancart, a very good candidate for the sprint victory. And of course, Lotto have to take the majority of the responsibility for the chase, because they have 4 men in an 11-man leading group right now. They're coming forward, and even Robbie McEwen has been pulled forward by the team to try and nail back this move. I think André Schmeel is having a hard time. You see Van Petegem going back there. He's looking for the other Lotto riders. Come on, guys, this is dangerous. If we start to mess around right now, we could see this man riding off towards the finish. He's still got a gap. It's not huge. It's around about 200 meters, but you see how that group behind was spreading across the road. Advantage right now is going to Denmark.
Well, that's a heck of a nice move by Frankie Hoy. He's taken advantage of infighting with the teams from Belgium there and the team from Cofidis, which is full of Belgians at the moment. Oh, it's a French team, of course. Here's a man who's just joined a new team, Team Coast. It's got a new direction now, Team Coast, because Frank was on the FDJ team, Française des Jeux team, last year. Now, he hasn't won a race since March in the year 2000. So that's not going to give him any confidence. So he's just stuck his head down and he's going to see if he can do it. And he's getting away. That is a big gap, 40 seconds.
Well, it might give him a bit of confidence, because that last victory, Phil, that many years ago, was in fact in Belgium in a small race called Fay-le-Franc, which is not too far away from here. The group now in a big long line, and they need to get themselves organised pretty smartly, because otherwise Frankie Hoy is the kind of rider, as you said, he doesn't get very many big wins, but you give him 100 metres or a 30-second advantage and he's very tough to pull back.
Well, that's what he's got now, a lot more than that in fact. 18 kilometres to go. There you can see him in the corner of our picture. The Lotto boys here, it's down to them, I feel. They should use one of the men now to try and get the reaction. But at this stage of the year, this stage of the race, they may not have the legs to have a reaction, and he may have hit them at the right time.
Little discussion going on here. The Lotto boys on the right hand side there, Peter Van Petegem. I noticed Andre Schmiel had just had a little word with Van Petegem as well. We're coming up to another section of cobblestones right now. Maybe the plan would be for Peter Van Petegem to launch the attack. If Van Petegem is feeling good, he needs to move right now, because I don't think that Lotto have very much firepower. Look at this. This is a bit strange. Two Lotto riders moving to the front. Big acceleration coming there right now. They won't get a lot of work out of Robbie McEwen. They will hold him back just in case it all stays together for the sprint, because of course Robbie McEwen is the fastest man in this group, the biggest winner of the overall of the cycling season so far.
And they know it too. Bet your life they do here. I don't think we're going to see a move from the Mapei boys. They look as though they're fully committed. Kevin Hulsman's here, puffing and blowing a little bit, as now there is somebody stretching the legs, and it's Andre Schmiel. It's left to the man who senses that they are facing defeat here, and this shrewd man has won all of the big bike races is now trying. We almost touched the wheel and went out of it then, but he's a rider who's desperate now to get people to bring the pace up. They are afraid that they are losing this race at 17 kilometers to go. Frank Hoy still full of fight.
Still full of fight. All he has to do now is concentrate. You see the face, you see the breathing. He's trying to keep as much oxygen going in there as possible right now. He knows, I think he has 2 sections of cobblestones to go right now before the finish. A 12-second advantage, that's not very much, but at the end of a hard race in the early part of the season, it can suffice for this man to just stay off the front end of the main pack. In the main group behind, I'm really astounded, Phil, at the performance of Lotto. Now here's a move. Schmiel is going again. He's been in this situation many times before where he's had to leap out of the group. He doesn't like to work with anybody else. It's Van Hacker who's coming across now for Landbau Credit. They're going through Lochristi, which is not too far away now from the finish line in Lokeren, but in fact what they do is they turn out on a small loop, a 16-kilometer loop in fact, to bring themselves down to the finish. And the reason they take that nice little 16-kilometer route is to find another couple of cobblestone sections.
10 miles to go. They're virtually scrabbling over each other now to try and close it down. It was left there to a lesser known on the professionals and one of the main professionals, Schmiel, here to cause the reaction. And they've got themselves 3 riders, but it's all over in Beervelte. We're going to find this chase group comes together. 15 kilometers to go, 14 seconds the gap.
Petegem moving now. Look at this. He's seen 1 or 2 attacks from his
big
teammate.
Move. That's a huge jump.
That's good. They're putting Bettini across the road. It was almost an illegal manoeuvre there, but Bettini's not going to get outfoxed by a move like that. He's straight onto Van Petegem's wheel.
Now we've got 1 rider away. No, we haven't. They're all together again. He's not going to take Bettini anywhere, I wouldn't think, but that little spurt, as you can see, has pulled it back to 12 seconds. Splitting the little chase group. Another attack going straight away. Cofidis this time. Chris Pears, perhaps to be expected. He's saving Joe Planker perhaps for the last attack, but Chris just hasn't got the legs today. The sudden burning of the lactic acid, he's got no more. Now who's going to make the next move there? Oh, they've got the split. They should have kept this one going because of the split in the field. Michael Van Haker here should really have gone through and carried on. Peter Van Petegem, Chris Pears and Paolo Bettini.
It's all back together. You see how very attentive Robin McEwen is starting to become right now. I think the Lotto boys did such a lot of work in the early part of this breakaway that in fact they're not really firing on all cylinders at the moment, but Schmiel will always have a go. Look at this, Phil. Schmiel moves up round the outside, the tough old man. In fact, he's nicknamed as one of the old Flandrians, despite the fact that he was a Russian, Moldovan, Ukrainian. He's very much been accepted by the Flandrians, but the strange thing is that he refuses to speak the language, much preferring to speak the French language, but he represents all that is tough about the old style Belgian bike riders.
Well, he is trying to learn the Flemish language. It's probably a little bit alien to his native tongue, and he says he will live in Belgium when he retires and he will learn the language. Well, that's hats off to him for that. Here we are regrouping again. I still cannot believe that 3 of the biggest teams in the world, Domo Farm Frites, Fassa Bortolo and Telecom, could not put a man in this breakaway. They have chased and chased and chased. They haven't even closed the gap, and now we're not even showing you their time gap. We're not too sure where they are, but this group here 13 seconds behind the leader, and that was a great attack there by Frankie Hoy, and it might be the winning move at 13 to go.
Just turn left there onto the next section of Kaseya, the cobblestones. This is the Volkensangstraat, this bird song street, and there's nobody twittering for Frankie Hoy right now because he's riding right down the middle of these cobblestones. At the back there, Robbie McEwen moving around the outside, doesn't want to get caught out, you see, by anybody who might have a bit of weakness at this stage of the game. De Hollander there wearing number 45. He's done an awful lot of work for the team today, so I think he's quite happy to take a back seat right now. Pressure on the front. Somebody seems to be edging away from the front end of this line.
Van Petegem, Paul. He just seems to love driving.
Oh, he's gone. Look at that.
He's gone straight off the front. This guy is absolutely incredible. He's looked good all day, and he's driven them off his wheel again on the cobblestones. This is how he got the chase going way back after the Molenberg, and now he's got to go it alone. He's obviously realised that. He can't wait for McEwen, and he can't wait for that group to attempt to gain ground because he thinks they're not going to catch up. So he's gone alone.
Some guys can float over the cobblestones. That's exactly what Van Petegem is doing right now, but you can see they're not letting him go away too easily. What would be a better solution right now would be somebody like Schmiel to come in front of that man there and just lay a nice soft tempo to allow this man to increase his advantage. But he's absolutely floating along. He's a great bike rider, very reminiscent of the attacking style of Johan Museu at the back of the group here. These guys are just surviving it. Looks as if it's Cofidis on the front trying to set the tempo, and that in this instance would be Joe Plancart. Bettini looking a little bit under pressure right now at the tail end of that group as well, but that is a good move. It's a big gap to jump across, but he's halved it, Phil, in around about 500 meters.
Well, this is a big move because now he's got away from that group, of course. The three Lotto riders are getting a free ride now because they've got every reason not to chase. It's down to the others, and that means that Robbie McEwen can take a breather at the back, and if they catch Van Petegem, well, he should be able to do it in the sprint. But they've got to bring back this man in yellow, and this is a good piece of very important team riding here for Coast. They need the publicity. They want a place in the Tour de France, and this is going to be seen as a good ride for them.
Well, it's a long way still. It's 100 meters, and at these speeds and at this time of the year it takes an awful long time to nail that back. He's off onto a nice smooth piece of road right now, taking advantage of the motorbike just a little bit, but that's the advantage of being at the front end of the bike race. Peter Van Petegem went around there as if he was stood still, and in fact going around that corner so fast, and that motorbike has pulled out right in front of Van Petegem. These photographers want the last possible photo that they can get here right now, but Van Petegem has nailed it down to 25 meters. Very shortly he's going to be on the back of the tail of the man in front.
10 kilometers to go, 6 miles. This has been a great race at Volk, a good start, all's well for the season. Now Team Coast have got their man in the lead, but Van Petegem is riding like an express train. There is the big man from Denmark, Frankie Hoy, and I'm about to say ahoy sailor because here comes the chase, and Peter Van Petegem, lovely pedaling style. He was briefly with the American Mercury team, but as we know now, as an international team, it collapsed last year. He's gone over to Lotto, and he's back in his element. He comes up to the leader. We have 2 men in the lead, inside 10 to go.
Former national champion of Belgium with the amateurs, and he's a real good bike rider. Chris Peers moving to the front now, working for his man, and his man is going to be Joe Plancart now. He won't get any help at all from Andre Schmiel. Plancart there on the wheel of the motorbike on the left hand side. There are 2 lines trying to get themselves organised right now. Lotto have hit them hard. They've taken the responsibility of getting a man across the gap, but the gap, Phil, is not a very big gap at all. Right now it's up to Cofidis to chase. That takes a bit of pressure off Robbie McEwen. He can sit in this group right now, and if it all comes back together, then the upper hand once again tilts across to Team Lotto from Belgium.
Well, our GPS system says 9, the banner says 10. Bit of a disruptor there for the 2 leaders. Half a mile could make all of the difference today. There is the 10 banner again. It wasn't long, was it? These groups riders here, but the good news for Lotto is they've got 3 spares now in that chase, and of course this man in yellow, Frankie Hoy, will have recognised the fact that he's now got 3 riders fewer chasing him down, and he might take comfort from that.
He knows exactly what's happening with tactically behind. He knows that the Lotto guys are going to absolutely sit on right now. Peter Van Petegem is their #1 leader. He's been successful in Het Volk in the past. In fact, he's won it on 2 previous occasions. Schmiel just sitting there, a real good tactician. In fact, it looks as if Dollander, in fact, has disappeared from the group. He may well have got popped off the back on that last cobblestone section. So only 2 Lotto riders in the group now, Shamil and Robbie McEwen. I think the important thing for Peter Van Petegem in the front is the presence of Robbie McEwen in this group, because the other guys will have in the back of their minds, why should I ride so hard? Because even if it does all come back together, McEwen's going to blast by us all in the sprint.
Yes, we've also, I tell you, we've gone missing too is Rolf Sorensen. Let's have a look at the 2 leaders anyway, Van Petegem and Frankie Hoy. This is a very nice move now. Van Petegem has had a deep breath. He's saying something there to Frankie Hoy. I don't know what it was, obviously, but it might be let's work together. We're still clear, but they're not very far behind. We're down to 9 kilometers to go. The Acta Volgas, the chasing group in Het Volk, been a full-on race this year by these riders, and a very good race indeed. Here's the Lotto riders just sitting around at the back. A word from the Lotto manager now to Robbie McEwen saying just stay cool, stay restful. I'm going to go up and have a look at Peter Van Petegem.
I'm not sure they'll let the Lotto team car go by just yet. They need to have at least a 30-second gap. The referee was right in there. This man looks cool and calm and collected. This is a last-ditch effort. If he puts everything into this breakaway right now and gets caught, he's got no chance at all of winning Het Volk. But he knows in the back of his mind that if he does get caught, it doesn't matter, because Robbie McEwen is right in there as well. These 2 men must work together, because at worst they can get 2nd place. But it was interesting to note in the group behind Phil, Paolo Bettini had come forward and he was trying to nail back the gap.
Well, good for Paolo. He's got another teammate in there in Kevin Hulsmans. Let's have a look as we pull back again to see what's happening. It's looking to me, it says 7 seconds on our time gap there, but these 7 men are looking to me as though they're losing a little bit of their impetus. Remember, of the 7, only 4 are riding hard, because the rest now are not chasing from Lotto. Lokeren, this is the finishing town, but we are still 5 miles from the finish.
Well, it's Hulsmans on the front right now. Team Lotto coming up alongside, having a quick word with their young man who's new on the block. Paolo Bettini, the most experienced bike rider. Now, this is the first good time check for the 2 leaders. 19 seconds now back to that chasing group behind. And I think very much now that the winner must come from these 2 riders, because they are both riding very well together. Nobody's playing any tactical jokes on the other man in the group. And just look at the pedaling action here of Peter Van Petegem. He really is ticking that gear over. And right now he'll be using a gear of around about 53.14, I would say.
Well, keep it going if you can, because the big thing about pushing heavy gears at this time of the year is the body tends to give out, because it's not ready just yet. They've done lots of training miles, but they haven't got the racing miles in the legs. Here is Bettini, looking very cool actually, and pretty good, heralding perhaps a good season for him. It's nice to see an Italian getting in the break in a rough road in Belgium, because they don't always like riding the rough roads of Belgium. But this man has looked sharp all day long, Peter Van Petegem. He's watched every move. He's even looked out for his teammate Robbie McEwen. But at the end of the day, it looks like he's got to go out and try and win it again. If he does win, of course, this will be his 3rd time in Het Volk.
Peter Van Petegem is really looking for the 3rd win today. Sitting on the back there, you see Paolo Bettini, and watch out for him, Phil, because if it all comes back together, Paolo Bettini has got a very good turn of speed. He's not a pure sprinter. He's the kind of bike rider who can climb, but in previous years we've seen him win stages in the bunch sprint at races like the Tour de Langkawi.
Robbie McEwen there taking a good look at everybody and has gone to the back of the group now. He doesn't need to be at the front, and that's the way he likes it. It's a great privilege for Robbie, which he appreciates, riding in the Australian Champions jersey. It's the first time he's won the professional road title. He did it just on 2 months ago, about 6 weeks ago to be precise, and he did it so well. He had to reach the leader, who was Nathan O'Neill, on his own on a difficult circuit, which he did, and then he beat him to the line. And I tell you, sprinters don't normally go and reach lone winners, but I think we're being treated to a repeat situation here with Van Petegem, a known sprint finisher, having to go out, pick up the winner himself, and let's hope he's got some legs left for the sprint.
Well, Van Petegem is not scared of going out in a breakaway situation either, because we've seen him in Paris-Roubaix and of course in Tour of Flanders, which he won, go out and win the race, not only from a small group but in the final sprint to the line. Right now those two guys, they've still got to keep working together, but it's looking much more like they're going to stay clear, because we're almost at the half-minute margin. Paolo Bettini has decided to come through. I think a bit of firepower disappearing from the Cofidis boys as well. Plancart bobbing his way further forward, and Chris Peers has been sitting on the back for the last kilometre or so, trying to get himself a little bit of a breath of fresh air into those lungs. Robbie McEwen is floating up and down this group as if there was no tomorrow.
He is, and you know, Bettini knows his situation, saw it as McEwen, received the pat on the back there from McEwen and went back in the line. He knows McEwen is going to do nothing. His job will be to clean up for third place from that group if these two stay clear. Just on half a minute and just 3 miles, probably slightly less now, to go to the finish. We are in the streets of Lokeren, but we're not yet at the finishing line, which is still 2.5, 2.75 miles away.
Well, they brought the race the whole way round town. We actually at one stage were only about 3 miles away from the finish line, but we've been out and done a 10-mile loop just to find a couple more sections of cobbles. Van Petegem, I think, Phil, must be feeling a little bit more comfortable, but he still needs the help of Frankie Hoy to stay off the front end in the main field, because they haven't laid down arms at all here. The only thing that I think is slowing down this chase group is the presence of the man on the back there in the national champion of Australia's jersey. They all know that McEwen has had a fantastic start to the season, and in fact he rode a very good Etoile de Bessèges where he took the overall victory there, and I think that's probably the first time he's taken the overall classification in a big European stage race.
I'd need to check on that, Paul, but you could well be right. McEwen certainly showing us a different side to his racing this year. We've spoken to him about it. He just insists on saying he has good form, nothing special, but you can sense his riding is different. He's looking for moves and not waiting for sprints, and that's a good omen. Well, 29 seconds the gap.
He's getting a bit older in the professional cycling, and I think in fact he's probably gained a lot more experience and a lot more confidence too, and especially having raced for some of the top Belgian teams. Oh, there's a little move off the front here. This looked like Chris Peers was trying to get off the front, chased immediately there, you can see, by Paolo Bettini. Bettini not letting anybody get away right now and dragging it all back together. Andre Schmiel, who, by the way, just for the book, was the last ever national champion of the USSR.
Yeah, absolutely right. Then they dissolved, and of course each country became its own identity. Talking back on Robbie there, Paul, just looking on his record, he did in fact win the 3 days of Depana. Oh, sorry, wrong man. You've switched my information. Thanks a lot. 31 seconds the gap, and I do believe it's going to succeed, and these boys are starting to look at one another and depend in fact whether there is going to be somebody gone away here. Somebody has left the group and left them chasing. Now it's a lightish coloured jersey. It looks like it can only be Michael Van Heecke, the Landbau Credi man with the red shorts on. Now this is a cheeky and an interesting move, and this is how it happened. It is indeed Michael Van Heecke. He has gone away and no reaction. I can't believe this. Nobody's gone after him.
He's looking over his shoulder to see if they're coming back right now, and in fact they've all been dragged back together by the Mapei riders and Andre Schmiel. He hit them very hard. It was just as everybody sat up and went across the left-hand side. Look at the smile there on the face of Andre Schmiel. He, I think, is starting to feel quite confident in the fact that Team Lotto are up for a victory today, and the victory could very well go to the shoulders of Peter Van Petegem. Van Petegem, I would think, feels fairly confident, but you know, Frankie Hoy, Phil, is a man with an awful lot of experience. He will, I would say, over the last kilometre and a half, take a back seat and allow Van Petegem to do the majority of the pacemaking, and hope that he can muster something to try and out-sprint the Belgian. But bear in mind, this race in the past on 49 separate occasions has been won by the Belgians, so I think today they will be looking at win number 50.
Indeed, indeed, and the riders now have turned back, bound for the town centre of Lokeren, having been around the outskirts. At 3 kilometres to go now for the group here. A very, very well-timed attack by Van Heecke. Didn't work out, but I think he was right to try it, and the others have got it back together. Now they're going to have to work somebody or some group away from that split, because if they don't, McEwen will finish third, and that will be great for Lotto.
Well, it would be, because at one time it looked as if they'd completely messed it up when the man in the yellow and black jersey there of Team Coast had got himself off the front alone. Now another move coming off the front here. I think again once more it looks as if it's probably the Mappe rider. That'll be Hulsman, followed by Van Hakke. Bringing it back together is Van Dijk, then Chris Peers for Cofidis, and the two leaders now. And it looks very much, Phil, as if for the last kilometre or so Frankie Hoy has decided to take up the tail position. 2 kilometres to go, and I think right now he's going to force Peter Van Petegem to do all of the pacemaking. They've got an advantage of 34 seconds, so they don't have to panic quite so much on the run in towards the finishing line. But this now is going to be the only chance, I think, that Frankie Hoy has got of beating the man in the front in the red and black strip of the Belgian team. He really needs to hold back and produce something very special in the sprint. However, I think the psychological advantage of having won this race before will go onto the shoulders of Van Petegem.
Well, he's gone through now, Frankie Hoy. He's still sharing. They won't start shadow boxing till they're into the last kilometre because they can't afford to. This is the break. Right in the distance where those cars are, you can see these two riders. Far too far away now. 34 seconds is a long way when you're just under 2 kilometres now to the finish. The first time that Van Petegem triumphed in Het Volk was 1997. He repeated again in 98. Frankie Hoy has never placed in Het Volk, and he's got himself in the right position. I keep going back to that bicycle wheel change. He's going to thank his teammate because clearly he did have good legs today.
Well, that's a thing that would have been discussed at the start of the day in the team meeting, to see who would be the dedicated team leader for the day. And obviously for today it was the man who is in second position there, wearing 1, 2, 3 for Team Coast. Now's the time where they'll start the tactical manoeuvring. Here's the Flamme Rouge, Frankie Hoy looking over his shoulder just for a final check to make sure that they feel they've got enough advantage over the chasing group to play these tactical maneuvers. And this, I think, is going to be a very strange sprint. What I would think Peter Van Petegem will try and do with about 500 or 600 metres to go is force the other. There's Van Haeke, he's gone again.
He's gone again. McEwen did not react. Bettini waved. I thought he was calling for service, but I think he was calling for help, and he's finally got it from his teammate Kevin Hulsman, who's come through. Well, you've got to hand it to that man, Paul, trying twice like that. Back at the front here now. This is a very fine piece of riding by Frankie Hoy. He's put the sprinter on the front, and he point blank refuses to come by him.
This looks like a track sprint right now. The gap between these two riders is as if Frankie Hoy was waiting to go up the banking to plunge down. Van Haeke has got a good move. His position here showing that he wants to try and survive and get himself third place on the road. But this is the important sprint right now. Look at this. Don't forget, by the way, that the man in the front there, Peter Van Petegem, spends an awful lot of time during the winter months actually riding on the track in Ghent. So he's got a good turn of speed. He knows how to sprint, whether it be in a small gear for big acceleration or in a big gear for sheer power. 400 metres to go.
Look at this now, stalking one another. Remember, Van Haeke is coming, and it was a good move by Frankie Hoy, but unfortunately Van Petegem spotted it coming. Half a second is a lot when you're preempting a move, and he's locked on to him now. He's going to sit there. You can see the difference in the sprinter, and this is going to be win number 3 for the man on the right. It's an easy victory in the end, but you know, in fairness, I think he was the best bike rider today, and in fairness to Frank Hoy, he did the best thing by going off on a lone sortie. Great result for both riders. Third time the victory now for that man Peter Van Petegem, and hang on in there because Michael Van Haeke is going to hold them off, and that's a personal great triumph for him. McEwen has cleaned up from Bettini and Kevin Hulsman and Andre Schmill. That was the order over the line. There's the average speed, 41 kilometres an hour. That's about 26 miles an hour. There's the congratulations.
Well, there's Mrs. Van Petegem, and she is very happily up there alongside her man Peter Van Petegem. And just a quick glimpse at his victory salute, Phil, coming across the finishing line. I think she has just recently had a new young baby, and that's why he was rocking his arms side to side in a Neil Stevens-esque type salute.
Yes, I think you're probably right, Paul.
All the riders worked really well together, and I was obviously the team leader before the start. But I made a real strong forcing on the Paderstraat because I felt that the group was too big. And then it was much better to have a small, compact group to be able to work together. And then on the cobblestones, towards the end I felt pretty good. And Frank Hoy is a strong bike rider, and I knew that I had to get across to him. And Andre told me, watch out for this, we need to do something right now. And the riders worked really hard for me on the last cobblestone section.
Derde keer gewonnen. Is het gevoel te vergelijken met de vorige 2 keer?
You're regarded as Mr. Het Volk now, you won it 3 times. The Het Volk race is a real good publicity for me, and it's fantastic, unbelievable, and it's just like the Tour of Flanders.
Het zegengebaar als je over de streep rijdt. We kunnen vermoeden waar het over gaat, maar je mag het zelf vertellen.
Vader geworden januari van zoon.
I just became a father in January to a new little boy, and that was just why I saluted at the end like that.
So this is how he did it. He came off that final bend, a bend he knows so well in Lokeren, took one good look at Frank Hoy to make sure there was no second kick coming from him, and then he saluted the crowd. His wife awaited him, of course, and he gave us the sign there of his child born in January. Frankie Hoy taking second place. A lot of respect between these two riders. Frank Hoy is a big, strong bike rider. He's not a great sprinter, not in the quality of Van Petegem. So Van Petegem knew he just didn't have to mess up the approach to the finish, and actually crossing the line would be something of a formality. But he's looked good all day, ever since he ripped the leading group apart on the Molenberg, the last climb of 10 climbs today. So the season is underway, and Van Petegem, almost by tradition, is the first man to claim a classic victory. The final result of the Omloop van Het Volk 2002, Peter Van Petegem of getting Belgium's 50th win in this race, ahead of Frankie Hoy. Michael van Heek getting a great result there for the Landbouw Credit team. McEwen coming home in 4th place. What a great day out it was. Andre Schmil in 5th, and that put 3 Lotto riders in the first 7 men home. Presentation time for Peter Van Petegem.